All right, I think we're recording, Casey.
Awesome.
All right, great. Hey, listen, thanks again. We're here with Casey. Pronounce your last name for me one more time. What, German?
Jermaine.
Germain, Casey Germain. I've called you Casey forever, so I apologize. Casey
No, no
Germain
worries.
here. He's with the Bozeman Running Company. He's Casey and the Bozeman Running Company are our business of the month here. And Casey, I've had a chance to meet you before. I've met you at the running shop, but I have just a few questions for you. This very first question I ask everyone that I encounter. It's the same question. As important as they are, setting your faith and family aside, and your business aside for that matter, what's the passion in your life, Casey? What gets you out of bed in the morning?
Well, I mean, the easy one for me is running.
Sure.
Obviously, is one major passion of my life, and probably the great outdoors. You know, I just kind of love everything outside, whether it's hiking, whether it's fishing, being in the mountains, running on the trails. Those are kind of the things that I love.
How'd your running journey start? How old were you, and how'd you get introduced to running?
It was years ago. It was I was junior high, probably sixth, seventh grade. You know, we always had the school fun run day where you'd go out and you'd run a mile on the track. And so there was always a little bit of drive there, but it was kind of as I got to junior high, a dear friend of mine and his dad kind of recruited me into running. Anders Brooker, who I ran with in high school and who actually owns a running store over in Missoula. And that kind of just got me into the sport. You know, I didn't even really know what cross country running was until they kind of introduced me to it. And that's kind of where the journey started way back then.
Casey, where'd you grow up? Where'd you start running, and what started you off? Which town were you in?
I grew up in Plains, Montana. So a lot of people,
Oh,
when you say Plains, Montana, they think it's Eastern Montana.
yeah.
It's the opposite. It's very Western Montana. It's about an hour west of Missoula, slightly north up there in the mountains. It was little Class B school. Beautiful spot up there.
And the Plains is Horseman, is that right?
Yeah, the Horseman, you got it.
All
Yeah.
right. I grew up in Columbia Falls, Casey.
Oh
So
yeah.
there you go. I did
Yeah.
not know you were a Western Montana guy. So you started running in junior high school. When did you start noticing, hey, I'm pretty good at this. I want to take it on. Keep
I
going
think
with it.
junior high and even my freshman year, I think I just complained about it a lot. If you
Sure.
ask people that coached me, I was more of I didn't really want to do it, complained a lot. I think probably midway through my sophomore year, it started to click a little bit. Like, hey, this is pretty fun, and I'm fairly competitive at this, and this is really cool, and it started kind of turning into the type 2 kind of fun,
Sure.
and then it just kind of snowballed from there.
And then you saw some success in high school. Did you run cross country and track in high school?
Yep. I ran cross country. Yep, cross country in the fall, and then track in the spring. In the wintertime, my freshman year, sophomore year, I played basketball in the
Sure.
winter, and then eventually, as running got a little more serious, I kind of quit basketball and then just kind of did my own kind of training through the winter to prep for track season.
Oh, good. Well, that's great. So, and how did you end up in Bozeman?
So I ended up signing with Montana State. So I was recruited by Coach Dale Kennedy, and I signed and ran here for the Bobcats, 2000 to 2005. Awesome experience. And that was kind of my, real introduction to Bozeman those years ago. Yeah.
And did you run after college too? Did you do a tour after that as well?
I did. Yeah. It was short-lived. It was small. It was just a couple years, but I did some post-collegiate training. Trained with a good friend of mine, Scott McGowan, who ran for the University of Montana. We trained in Missoula, bounced around, ran a few road races, ran a few track races after college, and then decided to grow up and move on.
And move on and decided they kind of used your passion to roll into the running company. Tell us a little bit about that. What made you decide to get into the business end of running?
Yeah, I think it kind of started, from I was a sales rep for a lot of years after that for Brooks. So I was selling running shoes to two different running shops around the country. And that, I think, started kind of triggering it a little bit. And I think from me as a sales rep, you travel a lot, you're on the road. And for me, it was like, boy, being a running shop owner would be ideal. You get to be rooted in a community. You don't have to travel a ton. You can kind of stay home and really kind of foster a running community. And that's, I think, kind of what started it. And people in Bozeman that have been here for quite some time know that that BRC used to be a Fleet Feet years ago. and I purchased that store, and then converted it to Bozeman Running Company. Fleet Feet's a national chain. It didn't make a lot of sense in Bozeman to have a national chain when you could just independently own it and market it that way.
Well, tell us a little bit about how you got started with Brooks first. How did you work did you travel? Where did you go? Did you have a region you covered? What did you do back then?
Yeah, I had a region. So really I was working in the store in Missoula for Anders and training, and I just was like, man, I could kind of start seeing I needed to start looking forward towards a career and what I wanted to do. And as you're working in the store, you get to meet these reps, and I thought, man, what a cool job. You get to travel around and sell running shoes all day long. Like, that's like a dream job, Yeah. So I literally just flipped the Brooks catalog over, and they have all the reps listed on the back of the catalog. And I just cold called. I said, what are my three favorite companies? And I just bing, bang, boom. And I said, okay, these are the three I'm going to call. So I flipped them over, called the companies, just left voice messages on all their phones. And it was probably a week or two later. I was confused because you always think like you work for Brooks directly. Well, it was an independent agency, and I get this phone call from this agency, and I thought it was this spam call trying to sell me something. And I'm like, who is this guy? And then he's like, oh, I'm with it was the Flaherty Green Agency. I'm with the Flaherty Green Agency, and he starts naming these brands and goes, and we represent Brooks. And right when he said Brooks, it clicked, and I said, this is where I left the message. And so I tuned in real quick, and it was by happen chance. So he had his current sales rep. Literally, they were in a meeting when the phone rang, and it was me calling, and he was giving his notice. And
no kidding.
Yeah, and I was the guy calling and left a message looking for a job. And so he said, just because by chance that had happened, you deserve an interview. So I said, okay.
You were sent from God, basically. Yeah. Yes, this guy's perfect timing.
Perfect timing. And he's like, it was really weird. He goes, I literally walked out of the meeting and I hit the message button and you were there. And so he's like, you get an interview. So I said, okay, great. His agency was out of the Midwest, so it was in Minnesota. And so he covered the Dakotas, Minnesota, upper Wisconsin, and Iowa was kind of my region, if you will.
Oh, okay.
And so, I went out there and interviewed, made the rounds through interviews, and then ended up getting the job, and then packed up and moved out, and started that journey.
So you saw how other stores operated. Did you get ideas about how you'd like to see your store operate when you were visiting these other stores?
Yeah, I think you learn so much in that process because of exactly what you said. Through my years of repping, I have literally been in every store from Seattle, Washington to Madison, Wisconsin. North of Wyoming, I've seen every single running store, and it gives you a good sense, and you can kind of take bits and pieces of really good ideas that these stores have implemented, and you kind of can bring it all into one. And so I learned a lot from doing that, just working with different stores, and you learn the good and the bad. In life, it's always good to learn from other people's mistakes. And
absolutely.
And so you kind of learn some ups and downs by working with different stores and doing different events. And working for Brooks, I was heavily involved in a lot of different events, like the Grandma's Marathon up in Duluth, Minnesota, and some of those things. And so and they sponsored the Twin Cities Marathon as well. And so there was a lot of cool things on the event side that I was plugged into as well.
Well, speaking of events, how has it's 2020 when we're doing this interview. We got COVID going on. Hopefully it will end one of these days. But how has it impacted your event schedule in the meantime? How is it? What's happened with COVID?
Yeah, the events pretty much have been pretty much non-existent this year. We've pretty much had to cancel almost everything. We were hopeful for a couple late season trail races, smaller, controlled, small groups. Of course, one of them's on the Foothills Trail, so
not this year.
Everyone knows what's going on up there, and so the Forest Service still has not said no, but they have not said yes, and so we're kind of still working through with them on whether we think that would be appropriate or not. I think on that race we would probably donate the proceeds of that race to the relief fund. You see a lot of those relief funds. And so if the Forest Service will allow us to do that, you'll see us roll something along those lines out for that late fall race. But pretty much everything was gone pretty much this year. And it started, we're big sponsors of Run to the Pub, and it started literally that weekend. And I think back then, everyone felt a little kind of blindsided, like
Yeah.
what's going on? And you're so confused, as were we, when we're just like, Tyler Wilkinson, he's the race director for that event. And all of a sudden it's like Thursday night and he's like, we have to have a meeting. And I'm like, okay, yeah. And that, at first you're thinking, oh, well, we're going to get ready for the weekend. And it's like, the weekend's not happening. And you're like, what? So it was very strange back then. And I think now we have a much better understanding of it, and why that was implemented back then. I think it just came as a shock so early on, but now you get it now. You're like, oh, that makes sense.
So some folks might not know this, Casey, but one of the top distance races in the country is the Bozeman Marathon. Tell us about that. If you have any involvement in that program, or what does BRC do with that? Yeah,
we started that race, almost 9 years ago. It's a Boston qualifying marathon event. I kind of had that vision, as the Lewis and Clark Marathon was in Bozeman for a lot of years, and they were kind of phasing out. Bozeman didn't have a marathon or half marathon to speak of. And so, and a fall long road race makes sense in Bozeman because you have a great training cycle, through the summer months when it's nice out and beautiful, and a fall race makes a lot of sense. And so I launched that race and tried to really come up with a really beautiful scenic course. And to be honest, the reason the course is what it is that's what I ran in college when I would do my long runs. It would be literally get vanned out towards Gateway, dropped off, and run back to MSU. And like, that was my long run. And so, and I loved it. It was just such a beautiful view. And so I was like, that would be a good marathon course. And the first day I started planning it, I drove out the Gateway towards Ted Turner's property there. And, I hit the odometer on the pickup and started driving and kind of drove, that almost the exact route. And then I got into town and I literally got down to Main Street in front of the old store in the corner of Church and Main, and the odometer clicks over at 26. And it was literally like, meant to be. And I was like, it's a marathon. And so then the finer details came along.
Casey, so how many people are you up to now that participate in the Bozeman Marathon?
Total between the half and the full, we're between 1,000 and 1,500 per year now, which is a great number. It's growing each year. This was a bummer to have this year hit, because it was projecting to look like it was even probably get close to that 2,000 person mark. I feel like once you get to about 1,000 people, you really start to see the snowball in events. They really start to gravitate, because as your friends talk you into a race and you're on the fence about it. Well, my buddy's doing it. Okay. And so it kind of has that effect to it. And hopefully this doesn't set us back too much with that race. But I think people are you're always surprised at how many people use that marathon as their Boston qualifier. And what a lot of people don't realize is it's the last weekend you can run a Boston qualifier for that next year. So it's their cutoff. And so it's literally a lot of people's last chance. Like, they may have gone to another marathon, didn't get the time they needed, or need to run a faster time. And then they come here
Casey, when you use the phrase Boston qualifier, maybe explain, if you would, for folks that aren't familiar with the process, how does one qualify for that Boston Marathon?
Yeah, so Boston has a standard of times that you have to race based on your age. So they'll have age groups, and based on your age, you have to run a qualifying standard to even get accepted in. And now it's gotten so competitive over the years, you even have to run faster than your qualifying time to get in because so many people are hitting the qualifying time. So you'll just see over the years, the times will just get a little quicker each year. And so, it's based on an age group, male, female. Here's a time standard you have to run. You run it, and then then you get accepted into Boston. And you
hope to get in, that you're fast enough. Even though you qualified, you still may not make it in because it's
not make it. Yep, exactly. And then
how many folks run that marathon every year in Boston?
I think it's between 20 and 30,000, somewhere right in that range. So it's a big number. Yeah.
They put a lid on it though, and it's just made it probably tougher to get into.
Yeah, correct.
Every year. Absolutely.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, listen, thank you so much for visiting with us, Casey. We really appreciate it. Bozeman Running Company is located on Main Street in Bozeman, and they are the Faust Law Office Business of the Month. We much appreciate it, Casey. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Lucas. Yeah, have a good one.
You too.